Hello and welcome. Just like any other makeover, I start by cleaning my piece, this cute little harp table. Stick around and see what we do with it. I'm cleaning this piece with White Lightning, which is a Dixie Belle product. It's a TSP cleaner. And then I make sure that I rinse it. I'm actually not going to be prepping this piece for paint, however. I'm going to be reconditioning the wood on the bottom, and then we're doing something a little interesting with the top. So we're starting with that upside down cleaning and getting it thoroughly taken care of. I try to remove those little brass caps on the feet. It's always surprising to me when they're still intact on a piece of furniture. So often you find a piece that's missing just one. Anyway, didn't want to go anywhere, so I'm going to roll with that. I tightened up a few screws in the base just to make it a little more sturdy. This screw is kind of stripped, I think, or the hole's too big. It just keeps going and going. So we might put some glue in there just to reinforce that joint. Or if I can pull out the screw, then maybe I'll replace it with a larger screw. I'm using Howdy Do hemp seed oil, and I'm kind of rubbing it into the wood to recondition it. It's amazing how good it makes wood look. Kind of like new again. I cleaned those little brass feet on the piece, and now I'm using a stencil brush with Dixie Belle's gilding wax in gold to give them a new lease on life. Normally I just hit the high points with gilding wax, but in this case I'm getting in all the details and covering the entire piece. Now I turn my attention to the top of the table. I'm going to use this sheet of paper that I bought in a shop that was like basically a placemat, and I'm going to decoupage it to the top of the table. I'm using Satin Clear Coat in Dixie Belle as my decoupage medium, and I just generously apply to the table. I'm putting it down towards the base just because it seems like the arrangement makes more sense that way. And I only have this one sheet, so I'm gonna apply it, and then I'm going to be adding paint and some other design elements to fill this top of the table. I try to work out as many bubbles as I can. This paper is a little thicker than normal decoupage paper, so it's going to be a little more difficult to work with. But my intention is to pour 2-part resin in the top of the table, so anything like that should not be an issue. So trust the process and stick with me. Sometimes I have to tell that to myself as well. I'm taking a plastic glove. It's kind of the same as some people balling up saran wrap, and I'm just using that to use my hands to work out those bubbles. I'm not going to get too upset if some wrinkles remain. The reason is because, again, I intend to add some other elements and pour some epoxy on top. So I am thinking that this won't be an issue. Here's what I'm left with, and it's not quite dry, so I begin to use some Black Sands paint from the Silk line of Dixie Belle to match the color of the paper. Well, I got it wrong on the first try, and I needed a little bit deeper black, so I ended up using Anchor. And here I stamped some IOD fern stamps, ferns and fronds I believe, and did a little watercolor on there. The background now looks too dark, but I'll correct that later. I'm kind of reading my design a little bit and using some gray paint as in the original design. So I'm basically trying to extend the design that's on that original decoupage piece. So I'm doing a little stenciling, put this in the corner, and just kind of working my way around the piece using kind of the theme has become this French theme. So I have a few stencils that have Paris and street names and that sort of thing, a fleur-de-lis, a crown, etc. I have a few stamps that I want to use, and I use a brayer with them. I kind of got them a little too inky, but in the overall design it won't really matter. I did blot it a little bit. One of them I put upside down. I ended up disguising that with decoupage. It's really not a big deal. When you see the entire composition, none of that will matter, and you'll be kind of amazed at the result. I have to tell myself that too. As I go on and add things, I keep telling myself, trust the process. Another thing that helps when you're doing something like this is to walk away from it periodically. When you walk away and then you come back, it'll jump out at you exactly what it needs. Another way to achieve that is to take pictures of it and then look at it on your phone. Seeing it from a different lens will actually really clarify things for you. Again, it'll jump right out at you. Now I'm using Iron Orchid Designs fern stamps, and I'm using the green ink. I'm a little unsure how this is going to show up, but we go ahead and give it a whirl. I'm using a brayer over the stamp to make sure that it has good contact. Not bad. Trust the process. The paper accepted the ink more easily than the painted surfaces, so I decided I would save those for a few transfer scraps that I had and concentrate mainly on the paper part, although I did some around the frame and I feel like it added visual interest in the end. I think part of this is just being relatively consistent the whole way around your piece. Now I decide to correct the fact that the border is darker black than the actual decoupage piece. So I'm just taking that lighter gray now and going around the border where they meet and kind of blotting it and going over some of the darker spots just to marry the two areas together. I've cut out some other images from some other decoupage paper, and I strategically place that. There's one flat side on that leaf, so I want to make sure that that hits a flat side of the table, if that makes any sense. So I am using, again, the same satin clear coat as my decoupage medium, and just carefully positioning that so I get that spot in one place. And since the piece is kind of delicate, I just kind of lift it up a little bit at a time and lay each piece down. I also cut a smaller image from the same paper, and because it has an edge, I apply it to a flat side as well. I raided my transfer scraps and pulled all the greens that I thought were appropriate to this piece that I didn't want to use for any other projects. Great way to use up your leftover transfer scraps. I really had to fuss with this one because I was probably applying it too prematurely. That's one of the worst things you can do, is put transfers on before your paint is completely dry, because I was adding so many elements to it. I wasn't really giving it enough time to dry in between, but I wasn't going to give up, and I kept working it, and eventually I brought some up. There was a little bit of paint that came up with it, but I sanded and fixed that because this was a fern and it was really important to my design, so I didn't want to lose that piece. If you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, and if you like this content, please consider doing so. If you like the Dixie Belle paint that I use in my project, it's available at the link in the description box. Also, there is my Amazon wish list. Thanks as always for watching and checking it out. Now I'm doing a two-part epoxy resin clear coat on the top of this table. I could have saved myself some time and just emptied both bottles into that cup because I used the entire contents. You have to use equal parts, and I used Envirotex Lite. You're supposed to mix the contents for 2 minutes, scraping the sides and the bottom occasionally, and then after that you transfer it to a different container using a different stick. For an additional minute you stir, doing the same thing, scraping the sides down. Then I was a little concerned there wouldn't be enough product to cover the entire top. I'm certainly glad I chose to get the 8-ounce size. So I had some product that I had previously, and at the advice of some other people who do this on a regular basis, they suggested that I start with fresh product. So not to let the other stuff go to waste, I'm going to experiment with it in some shallow castings and perhaps another tabletop. Because once you put this stuff in here, there's no removing it. I continue to spread it around. It takes a while to make sure that I don't have any little holes. One area that concerned me was on the big pink flower. A little bit of the paper was up, and I'm thinking that this would push it down. I really should have glued it back down because essentially it kind of floated up. So I think that might be the only flaw in my surface. Here I'm using a lighter and also the heat gun. This bursts little bubbles that you have. Using the heat gun was kind of cool because it actually made bubbles and then it burst them. Here's my client's room. So this is kind of why I went for the color scheme and all the ferns. That was the story behind it. And here's how this table ended up. It is still drying, but the look is going to be the same once it dries. So she wants to use it as a coffee table, and I think it'll serve her well. What do you think? Thank you so much for watching today. If you like this video, how about giving it a thumbs up and also share it with your friends? If you haven't subscribed, you'll want to do that so you don't miss anything. Visit us at lavintagedecor.company, and on Instagram we're LaVintageDecor, and on Facebook we're LaVintageDecor Altoona. Stay well.